In this video, I'm going to show you how to save and load information between scenes in Blender using Python. I have a jumping game set up that I've showcased in previous videos, where I have a player. The player has a property called jumps, which is displayed in the top left-hand corner using debug properties, and the number of jumps increments every time the player jumps. I've also duplicated my level and created a daytime version and a nighttime version. I've added logic to my camera so that I can move between the two levels. If I press up and it's nighttime, the sun comes up, and then it's day. If it's daytime and I press down, the sun goes down and it's back to night. So if I press play, start at the nighttime, I can accumulate a few jumps. If I press up, you'll notice that jumps resets. I can jump again in the daytime and press down, and you'll notice that jumps has reset for my nighttime player. You'll also notice that my players have different names. In the daytime, my player is called 001, and in the nighttime, my player is called 002. That's going to come into play when we create our logic for saving and loading information. So let's get started by creating a script to save our information whenever we switch scenes. To do that, I'm going to replace the AND controller with a Python controller. I'm going to call it save and link it up. And what I'm going to do is write a new Python script, which I'll set down here, to save the information. At the top, I'm going to click on the scripting tab. If this is my first script, I'm going to click the plus new, and I'm going to name the script save. This is case sensitive, so if I name it capital SAVE, then when I come back over to the logic, I need to make sure it's typed the exact same way. And in fact, I'm going to use the drop down to make sure I don't misspell the name of the script. All right, so in order to implement Python logic, we need to import the Blender Game Engine BGE package. And from BGE, I'm also going to import logic. And this is going to simplify the code we write a little bit. Without the statement on line 2, we would have to write bge.logic.getCurrentScene, for instance. With the second statement, we can shorten it a little bit and just say logic.getCurrentScene. Okay. Save information. I'm going to grab the current scene. I'm going to set scene equal to logic.getCurrentScene. I'm going to grab a list of objects for the scene and store that in objects. So objects equals scene dot get, scene dot objects. I'm going to check which scene I'm in. I'm going to check if scene.name equals day. Then I'm going to save the information from my daytime player. I'm going to do that by storing it in the global dictionary. I can access the global dictionary by typing logic.globaldict, D-I-C-T. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new property, jumps. Globaldict jumps equals objects, and I can reference the daytime player by its name, so player.001, and I can reference the jumps property also by its name, jumps. So if scene name equals day, I'm going to set the jumps property of the global dictionary equal to the jumps property of my daytime player, player001. If scene.name equals night, I'm going to set the jumps property of global dictionary equal to the jumps property of my nighttime player, 002. I like putting all the logic into one file. I think it makes it easy to manage, and I can reuse this file over and over again in my logic. And that actually makes it easy if I'm copying and pasting objects between scenes, because that same logic can work over and over again. You could, if you wanted to, write different save scripts for each scene. That's completely up to you and your preference. The next thing we need to do is we need to activate these actuators. Well, right now there's only one actuator. So when you call the Python controller, it doesn't automatically trigger the actuators attached to it. You have to do that using Python. I'm going to say activate actuators. I'm going to do this using a for loop. And the advantage of this, I could activate each actuator by its name. I could say day actuator activate. But if I use a for loop, then this allows me to make changes to these actuators, and I don't need to change the code. So if I change the name of this actuator, or if I add new actuators, I don't need to make any changes to this code. The way I do that is I first grab the controller. I'm going to say cont equals logic.get current controller. And I'm going to use a for each loop. For act in cont.actuators. For each actuator in cont.actuators, I'm going to call cont.activate act. So, get the current controller. For each actuator in the controller, activate that actuator. And I put a semicolon there, but in Python we don't use semicolons. All right. In order to see this working, we actually need to create the load script as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an always sensor and another Python controller. I'll call this one load and link that up. And what this will do is this will load all of our properties whenever the scene first starts up. I'm going to come back to scripting. To create a new script, I'm going to click on this icon right here. I'm going to call this load. I'm going to go back to my Python block and make sure that's connected there. Oh, make sure it matches up. So save is calling the save script and load is calling the load script. And actually my load script and save script are going to look very, very similar. So I'm actually going to copy all my code from save and paste that into load. The main difference here is I'm going to switch this. Instead of sending the global dictionary property equal to the player, I'm going to set the player property equal to the global dictionary. So we'll do that for both day and night. So grab the current scene, grab the objects from the scene. If the scene name equals day, set the daytime player jumps equal to the global dictionary jump. If the scene name equals night, set the nighttime player jumps equal to the global dictionary jumps. And then for good measure, run all the actuators. If you look back at my logic over here, I don't have any actuators, so that code will just skip over. But it's good to have in case you want to add actuators later on. Maybe there's something you want to do whenever the scene loads up. All right. So let's try this out. In order to do that, though, I need to go add the save and load logic to my daytime camera. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to replace this AND controller with a load. or sorry, save. Whenever I switch scenes, I want to save. I'm just going to reuse the same script I've already written because it works for both scenes. And I'm going to add an always sensor. And I'm going to call my load script. And again, the beauty of this, since all my logic is in these two scripts, I can copy this player to another scene. If I wanted to do a full copy of this and make an afternoon scene or something like that, this player gets duplicated again with the, or sorry, this camera gets duplicated with the logic, and it comes with the save and load, and I can make adjustments to how I want to switch between scenes. All right, so let's test this out. I'm going to press play. I'm in the daytime, I'm jumping, I'm accumulating jumps. When I press down, that information gets saved to the global dictionary, and then during the night, it gets loaded back up into player 2. So if I jump, I have 7 jumps on player 2, go back to the daytime. Player 1 now has 7 jumps. Jumping again, still accumulating jumps. And I can switch back and forth between the two levels. And you'll notice like the number flickers a little bit when you switch. That's because, again, it resets to 0 every time you switch to scene. But using that Python, we're immediately loading that value into the jumps property. I'm going to show you how we can simplify this logic even further using instances. So what I've done is I've created an assets level, and I've created a collection for my player. And this player has his logic for jumping, and he has his jumping property. And then what I've done in day is I've added an instance to that player. And in night, I've added an instance for that player as well. My player instance is called player in every single scene because they're all instances of the same object. They all have the same logic. When I press the spacebar, they jump and they have a jumps property and they increment. But what I can do in the logic, here's my load. You'll notice that I got rid of the information for checking different scenes because really there's only one player object. Objects players equals the global dictionary. Object player jumps equals the global dictionary jumps. And this works for all scenes since they're all instances of the same player. Similarly with save, there's only one value I need to save, and that's the jumps property for the player. Because I'm using the same player, I'm using instances of the same player in all my scenes, I don't have to specify, okay, I want to save the jumps property for player 1 in the daytime and player 2 in the nighttime. It's all just player. And that's one of the beauty of using instances, is it does simplify your logic a lot. So here I have 4 jumps accumulated. I know that just looked just now that like that didn't work. That was because I deleted the logic. But with the logic restored, I could switch back and forth. And the logic looks pretty similar to what it did in the previous example. I have an always sensor and a load controller. And then for my down or up key, I call save, and then I switch to the appropriate scene. And I can accumulate some jumps in day, switch to night. Those jumps carry over. All right, so that's 2 ways that you can save information and load information between scenes in Blender using Python. Thanks for watching and happy blending.